Jason Hoyte, welcome to Between Two Beers.
Pleasure, fellas. Pleasure. Can I just make a point, though, before we get started? You got me on a little table here. I don't know what's going on, but there's a lot of stains on this table.
Yeah.
Looks like some coffee action. There might even be maybe some beer or booze action going on this table, and there's a little bit of dust on it too.
Well, we are coming.
Maybe we could have wiped it down before we started. I'm not blaming you guys. I'll blame the other fellas.
Well, there's only one man to blame for that, and that's ACC head Mike Lane.
Yeah,
I think
that makes sense.
I mean, it's a crying shame that the Export Beer Garden studio is not cleaner. And I will say there is a thin film of what looks like dust on my Between Two Beers glass in front here, which I think I brought that up from Hamilton with me, actually.
Yeah, well, look, it's not acceptable, is it? And you're right, it would be Lane.
You've put us on the back foot early, Jase.
Well, that was my intention, yeah.
Well done.
And I appreciate that. Yeah, sorry. Let's get an apology out of the way.
Yeah.
Let me try to raise you back by saying we made a list at the start of the year, 3 dream guests we would have on this podcast in 2022. Right. Tim Brown.
Yes.
Former All-White, founder of Allbirds.
Billionaire founder of Allbirds.
Did you score some Allbirds?
Well, he's
we're
proved
trying.
hard. He's proved hard to get.
Yeah.
Jeremy Wells, who we know, is also proven hard to get. And Jason Hoyte, you were the third. Not the third. You were one of the 3 in the list. And
thanks, fellas.
We are very excited to dig into your life.
Yeah.
Just to start with, I'm not sure you know this, but you are a very big influencer of the way men of a certain age, and certainly our friend group,
and
talks,
us. And us. And us.
So on the drive up, I was thinking about all the things that we kind of say and how, you know, that they've basically come from you and sometimes an extension Leigh Hart. There's the "G'day, mate."
Yeah,
is very, very commonly used. There's the he's dead, isn't he?
Oh yeah.
There's the "if I can just interrupt you," which we always do in conversations from the sort of late night big breakfast.
Yes.
Actually, if I could just interrupt you there, Steve.
Yeah.
Jase has come at me early doors because I've had a situation on the drive up where I've had to change a tyre, and without batting an eyelid, Jase has given me backbone.
Oh, massive, man.
And I don't want to talk about having to change. I don't want to talk about changing the tyre, but I did.
Yeah.
Oh, look, I mean, in terms of changing tyres, that is total backbone activity, man. And my respect for you has gone up immediately. I mean, I don't even know you, but knowing that you've just changed your own tyre, backbone, mate.
Real man points there.
Thanks, mate.
And the other one, more recently, is "you mad bastard." I sent an email to Shay last night, "you mad bastard." It's the Hoyte influence.
Yes. Well, I have to say, in all fairness, you mad bastard is a Minogue. But I use that one. But it's funny how these things, come into being. It's like, thanks, mate. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it's funny what people sort of latch onto. And you'll be walking along the street, just minding your own business, and someone will come up behind you and go, "Is it?" And, you'll have a minor heart attack. And it's happened, seriously, it's happened to me in the supermarket so many times, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is funny what people latch onto.
Is it quite awkward when they do that in social setting? You don't really know how to respond, or what do you do back to that?
I tell you what is really, I had a situation once where I was in the supermarket, true story this, and the person, there was a couple standing in front of me, it was in the express lane there, and they started talking about me.
Wow.
And I was right, and they were looking at me and going, "That's that dude. That's that dude on the telly," and they started talking about all the stuff that I did on the telly and blah, blah, blah. And I was literally like a metre away from them, and you're just sort of standing there staring at them. That sort of stuff is very weird.
Yeah.
I tell you what's been the bane of my life, actually. I don't know if you ever saw the sketch with Nadia Lim. Cook me some eggs.
It's on our list. It's on our list.
Jeez, we'll get to that later on then.
Yeah, looking forward to get to it. But before we do, the way we do things here Between Two Beers, we tell the audience how we know the guest. Shay, how do you know Jason Hoyte?
Well, I grew up in Taupo, and Sugar and Spice.
Oh, wow, okay.
Was a pulp comedy.
Yes.
Friday nights when you had 3 TV channels as you did then. That was quite often a go-to. So I digested that. Very funny. I always thought Johnny was New Zealand's answer to Rowan Atkinson with the sort of facial expressions and the way his comedy kind of came through there.
Yeah.
And then you came back big time with the Late Night Big Breakfast, which, Stephen, I know is one of your favourites.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, Late Night Big Breakfast and Bhuja, 2 real fundamental laugh factories of me growing up. And I remember when Bhuja was first broadcast, I was driving to Taranaki, and it was on radio for the first time. It was like a Saturday morning, I think.
Yeah.
And I was so excited that you and Leigh had cracked it onto radio, and I was able to listen to it on my dial-up. But I didn't appreciate the full body of work that you've done until the last few days when I started researching your life.
Right, okay.
And I'm going to read out a list.
Yes.
Now, these are just some of the shows you've been involved with across your career.
Hit me, man, hit me.
Okay. Young Hercules, and then Hercules. Xena, Street Legal, Power Rangers, 7 Periods with Mr. Gormsby, Outrageous Fortune, Shortland Street, The Jackie Brown Diaries, The Almighty Johnsons, Underbelly, What We Do in the Shadows, Nothing Trivial, Wellington Paranormal, The Brokenwood Mysteries, and of course Moon TV. That's actually less than half of your 43 credits on IMDb.
Yeah.
I thought about reading them all, but it would be a bit much. But when I read that out and when you're looking back, do you remember all those, or all a bit of a blur?
Nah, man, I don't remember it at all, to be honest. Well, you know, I've got this sort of weird philosophy. Of course, there's some things I remember more than others, but I've got a kind of philosophy in terms of my work. I do the job and move on. You know, and often people will say to me, "Oh, I saw you in blah 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 blah," and I'll think to myself, quite genuinely, "Shit, was I in that?
Yeah.
Was I in that? Was I? You know, because I don't recall." You know, and I've been sort of doing this business now since my early 20s, and you know, over a period of time, you do build up a body of work, and sounds quite impressive when you do it
Very
like
impressive.
that. You know what I mean?
It does.
I was actually really lucky when I got into acting because, you know, I loved the acting at school, and in fact, in my last year at school, I did 4 plays, and I was going to different schools to do plays, and you know, I always wanted to get into acting. It was always my sort of passion, but everyone said to me, "Oh, no, you know, no, there's no career in acting in this country. You're a big fish in a small pond at school, but out there it's really different." So in many respects, I've been really lucky in terms of having those opportunities early on, and I guess once people sort of get to know you over time, casting directors and stuff like that, you know, you get more and more sort of work. That's generally how it happens.
Yeah, so we're going to get into more of the acting stuff a little bit later.
Yeah.
And if you've watched any TV in New Zealand for the last 20 years, you'll know the face. But we want to actually start with the voice. It's got to be one of the most recognisable voices in New Zealand. It's right up there with the Mad Butcher, I reckon.
It's beautiful getting him in the cans straight up here.
Yeah, it is. This is a great experience for us. But when did you realise you had a talent for the voiceover stuff?
Well, that was really funny, actually. Like most young fellas, you know, I went through the puberty cycle, and I was a very weedy, skinny-ass little dude at school, and you know, went through puberty, and it's, you know, it's all like that, and you go up and down, and you know, I have recollections of when I was like 12 and 13 of people just stopping when I started talking and just staring at me because they couldn't reconcile my voice with this rather withered, tiny body that it was coming from. You know what I mean? So yeah, and actually, in that regard, I've been really fortunate in my career too, because of, you know, I've had a lot of voice work and stuff, which has supplemented all the other sort of stuff that I've done. But over the years, I think it's sort of probably got a little more resonant thanks to the ciggies and the booze.
Is
you know what I mean?
Is it a lucrative game, the voiceover game? Asking for a friend.
Yeah, no, yeah, it is. It was for a while. For me personally, it sort of quietened down a little bit. I mean, there was a time where, 10, 15 years back, I was doing 2 or 3 voiceovers a week. And, you know, that was good money. It's certainly, as an actor in New Zealand or a performer in New Zealand, you've got to kind of have a few bows to your string. And so being able to do voiceovers certainly, you know, gave me more opportunities. That's for sure.
And once you've got the voice, is it easy to do? I mean, you're just reading scripts.
You know, you learn sort of techniques and ways of going about it. You know, I also did a lot of sort of voiceovers for shows, you know, like Dog Squad and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, I can smash through those pretty quick now.
Was there a story about Dog Squad that they went searching for a new voice or something and then ended up rehiring you for the show?
Yeah, that's true, actually. That's true. I think TVNZ said, it's time to change it up a bit and get another voice, and they did, and then they came back to me and said, and the weird thing about that was actually I had to re-audition.
I was going to ask.
And I was like, but I've been doing it for, you know what my voice sounds like, so re-auditioning seemed a bit ridiculous.
Did you change it up at all during the second audition phase, or just...
No, mate, just the same.
Just the same.
But then a gang of youths, you know... Then drama.
Yeah.
It's one of those curiosities that your voice is so recognisable, but in a lot of your other work, it's the satirical voiceover stuff, the infomercials the health corner, I think it was.
Yeah.
And with Rictasol, was it Rictasol and Flutasol and
yeah. They're all Leigh Hart creations there, and I've always been of the belief in terms of the best comedy is real to real life as possible. You know what I mean? The thing about comedy is you don't play the comedy. You play it straight, and the comedy comes from playing it straight. You know what I mean? When you try and play a gag, it doesn't work as well. And, you know, I'm very hopeful that in my later years that voiceover guy and that those ads that I used to do for Moon TV will become my reality. You know what I mean? I'll actually have a lucrative career in doing all those Rectisols and stuff like that. It'll be good. That's what I'm going to sort of branch into later on.
The Bannex fecal shield was another one that just. But it creates this kind of weird thing where when you are doing serious voice work, if you know your voice, people are sort of triggered, going, "Oh, I wonder if is this a gag or is this a genuine?" Do you get that at all when you go to clients looking to use your voice?
No, that's that's a really good question actually. Not that I've ever sort of encountered. When I do serious voiceovers, they're serious, and I also do a lot of sort of comedic voiceovers and stuff like that. So it's whatever the client wants, really. You know what I mean? And half the time I don't know what they want. So you just
you get what you get.
You get what you get, exactly. Yeah.
You just want those deep tones.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to start painting the picture of Jase's story. So grew up in Rotorua and around 12 or 13 moved to Auckland to attend boarding school at Dilworth.
Well, I'll just correct you there. I started boarding school when I was 9. But I think you're right. I think we did.
Don't try and placate him.
Well,
don't try. If he's got it wrong, he's got it wrong.
I think we did move to Auckland when I was about 12.
Okay.
But I might be wrong. I can't remember.
There or thereabouts.
Yeah.
My research suggests you were the class clown at school, and you met Brendan Lovegrove.
Yeah.
You failed maths, but you would on occasion write your maths teacher poems.
Yes.
How do you remember Jase Hoyte, the schoolboy?
Mrs. Foley, her name was. She was lovely. And I was shithouse at maths. I was really bad at it. No surprise there. And she very kindly allowed me, because I used to write poems to her during maths class, and she very kindly, and one would say somewhat stupidly, allowed me to read them at the end of the lesson. But
to her or to
her? Yeah, to her
and plus class.
Oh, to her and the class.
Beautiful.
And there was another colleague of mine who also wrote her poetry too, and he went a step too far one time. With the innuendo, can we put it that way, that she had to call a halt to that. But, yeah, I guess I was the class clown. I always found it a very effective way of not getting the crap beaten out of you. If you could make people laugh, then, you were generally pretty safe. But having said that, I got into a few tussles in my time. I came from Rotorua and, I was brought up in some tough environments. So I was quite a vicious little fighter actually back in the day, but I was always in the end the peaceful dude that tried to break up fights. But yeah, I think humour and and guys like Brendan, my great mate, another guy Martin Lark, we all had a sense of humour. We all that's how we got through school. And we'd have things like Culture Club, where you'd do sketches in the morning for your classmates and stuff, and I was always the one doing Culture Club. No one else would ever do it, as I mean. It was, okay, time for Culture Club, and my mates and I would just, another guy, Jason Payne, we would just make up sketches and just perform them in front of the house, and people used to love them for some reason.
Because was Dilworth quite an arts and culture type of a school? You've mentioned already that you were in 4 performances, I think, in your last year of high school. So was that actively encouraged through the school then?
I don't know. I mean, like any school, we had productions each year, and I started getting into that in the 5th form. And I'll be honest with you, the only reason that I got into it was because they were doing it with girls.
Yeah. Yep.
And so it was our opportunity. I think it was at the time with Diocesan School for Girls, which was right next to our school. And so, I was encouraged one day to audition for a show called Showboat. Don't know if you fellas know that.
Don't know Showboat.
No, it's a sort of classic old sort of musical. and I auditioned for it and so forth, but I ended up getting the main part, and I was like, oh my God, what the hell? And then, you get given the script, and everyone sort of cracked up when they found out that I had the main part, and you get the script, and it was like, well, I have to learn all this? I have to remember all this? My God. And it was a tenuous time, actually, because I was in the fifth form and an ugly beast, to say the very least. I mean, I had terrible acne. I was just a very unappealing, heinous sort of looking teenager. And the woman that played my wife in that particular production was in the seventh form from Diocesan, and she was beautiful. She was stunningly beautiful.
Are we able to shout her out?
I can't remember her name, but I just remember that she was beautiful. And I just couldn't look her in the face. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, my God, because... and actually, I had my first humiliation on the acting front there too, because Captain Andy, who was the character, was required to sing a song. And so I started singing this song with the whole cast on the stage in rehearsal, and I started singing the song. And the director went, okay, whoa, I'll just stop you there, Jase. And he walked up to the stage and he said to me, what we're going to do is we'll just get you to say the song. Don't
read anything into it.
Don't sing it. Just say it, Jase. You just say it. And everyone went, oh. So that was sort of slightly humiliating, but that was my first taste in terms of, we did the Culture Club and did all sorts of stupid sketches in terms of doing like a proper, musical / play.
When you do your impression of an actor now, did you hone that back then as a year? What is it? Year 11 in the current. I get so
confused with the years.
Yeah,
form
5,
I mean?
fifth form.
Yeah.
That sort of thespiac kind of delivery. Did you have that in your locker as 15-year-old Jason Hoyte?
I don't know that I consciously did. I think it was I was given the character and just created the character in my head and went out and blasted it out. You know what I mean? And people seemed to really enjoy it. And I remember the tremendous high and buzz of it. You know what I mean? And I really remember, especially when you got a big laugh, because we'd have 500 in the audience. It was a big crowd, and you get a huge laugh and the sort of adrenaline rush that you got from that. I also remember standing in the wings with my great friend now, Felicity, who was from Dio, before we went on stage for that opening night, and just crapping my pants and just looking out the curtain and seeing the sea of faces and going, oh my God, what have I done? And the director had said to us, well, don't worry, because when you go on stage, the lights will blind you. You won't be able to see anyone.
Much similar to the studio.
Yeah, well, very similar to this sort of setup. And I went on stage and saw every single face there and just went, oh, God. But I just put the hammer down and just went for it. And I think was addicted from there, really. I just loved it. I loved being able to play with an audience and that sort of live feeling. It was great.
So link us up to the formation of Sugar and Spice. This was a couple of years removed from school, was it? With Johnny?
Yep. Well, I met Johnny Bruff through Brendan Lovegrove. Brendan Lovegrove, who went to Dilworth with me, he left Dilworth in the 7th form year and ended up going to Sacred Heart College. And he met Johnny Bruff at Sacred Heart College, and they got on great guns. And then after we all left school, I'm not sure specifically how it happened, but Brendan brought Johnny along to where we lived above a butcher shop in Remuera, me and my great mate Martin Lark, and I met Johnny there, and it was one of those things where we just clicked instantly. We just had exactly the same. In fact, the same with B. We all just had the same sense of humour, and we used to have just great times together, just cracking ourselves up, you know what I mean? And that's when I first met Johnny.
Sugar and Spice was a little before my time. Yep. Shay sort of caught some of it. But I've gone back and I've watched there's some great videos on Vimeo of Sugar and Spice. Man. I watched one the other night, and it's really impressive. Like, it's really good stuff. It's big, long monologues, and it's sort of absurdist comedy. Yes. But I've heard you talk about your show Atrocities, which you said is the best of Sugar and Spice. Yeah. Which you described as basically all the bits that you weren't allowed to have in a stage show, and you put it all in one show, and it was just kind of chaos and mayhem. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, what happened there was, when you're creating comedy, as John and I were back then, you're always sort of pushing the edge of things. And there would be times where we'd come up with an idea for a sketch and we'd go, oh, Oh, no, we can't do that,
can
man.
we?
Yeah, that's too... I mean, we did some crazy shit, don't get me wrong, but, there were times where we went, oh, no, we can't do that. That's too far, you know what I mean? And that happened to us quite a lot, actually. And then eventually when we wrote Atrocities, the kind of idea behind that was that, as the name suggests, it was all those things that we... in the past went, no, we can't do that. We went, bugger, let's just do it. Let's just do all that stuff that just goes way over the top and way over the edge. And yeah, I still think it's Sugar and Spice's best show that we did. And people loved it.
So how was it received?
It was received massively. And I remember the opening night of that very well too, down at the Basement Theatre there. And because for the start of that show, we fell through a hatch at the top of the, into the sort of cell-like scenario. And I remember Johnny and I just standing there in the hatch. And I was always a terribly anxious performer. I'd be gagging and, sort of throwing up. And Johnny was a bit more relaxed, but he was quite tense too. And I remember both of us just standing and looking down at that hatch and going, well, once we jump through this hole, there's no coming back. You know what I mean? And it was one of those situations where you can't go half-assed with it. You just have to go full noise in terms of, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it to the fullest extent. We had Oliver Driver, who was the director, and Ollie really pushed us with that. And it was the first time really anyone had worked with Sugar and Spice that really disciplined us and made us really work hard at it. But yeah, it was massively received. And we really did push the boundary.
I'd also heard that you got a kind of a weird sense of joy from bombing shows. You'd get out there and you'd enjoy. What was that?
People often talk about, particularly with stand-up comedy and stuff, the concept of bombing, and it is horrific. I mean, when you're bombing,
that's when no one's laughing, right?
Yeah, bombing is when you're just dying on your ass, basically, and there's just silence and tumbleweeds of going through the place, and everyone's just sort of staring at you. And I've seen some spectacular ones over the years, I can tell you, particularly on rookies' nights. You get guys that would go, I'm a funny bastard, you know what I mean, at work, and then they'd go on stage and they'd do their first gag, no laughter, and you'd see them just physically crumble before your eyes.
And that's why I've never done an amateur comedy night.
Well, you should give it a try, man. It's all good. But Johnny and I got, and we bombed a few times. Of course we did. We bombed quite a few times. But we got a sort of perverse joy out of it. And I can't really explain it, but there's something unique and magnificent about dying on your ass when you're trying to make people laugh. You see, that was the way Johnny and I were. There was something deeply humorous for us in that, you know what I mean? And we used to do crazy stuff, man. We because Johnny had you mentioned Johnny, his face is hilarious. He was just his face was so funny. And everyone used to go, oh, well, your face just cracks me up. And so one time we had this concept of, well, let's just prove we're more than our face. You know what I mean? So he went on and did a gig with paper bags over our heads. And well, we died on our asses, but we found that hilarious. I think the funniest bomb we ever did was when we went on stage and we were wearing underwear covered in tin foil and a bow tie. And we went on stage and all we did was this funky music was playing and we covered ourselves in oil and we're doing this sort of funky dance. And we thought that was hilarious. And it was like a 15-minute gig. And a minute into that gig, we realised we'd made a terrible mistake. Because we were like, seriously, this is it, man. This is all we've got. I mean, the bow tie and tinfoil undies, covering ourselves in oil dancing. And it was like, what? Why did we think that was going to last for 15 minutes? You know what I mean? It was just a disaster. But weirdly, again, we found that hilarious.
Did you do the full 15 minutes?
Oh, I think we maybe did 10 and sort of skulked off the stage and went, oh, we won't be doing that again.
It must give you incredible confidence enjoying bombing, though, because then what have you got to fear? You don't really care. If it goes well, it's good. If it bombs, it's good.
Well, I mean, obviously your preference is to not bomb. You know what I mean? Obviously, you want to make people laugh and for it to succeed. But yeah, I think if you've got that kind of attitude to it, then it definitely helps you. I think Jim Carrey used to, was famous for just going on stage and making crap up, and he'd bomb all the time. And he would say that actually it was the bombing that taught him the most about comedy. Was when he went really badly, it would be like, okay, I've learned a lesson there. Don't do this and don't do that. And we weren't quite so good in that sense. I mean, we didn't learn a lot of lessons, but because of the nature of what Sugar and Spice did, we were always going to bomb at some point, but also there was an element with people, with the audience with Sugar and Spice, where they would be watching us going, what the hell is this? Yeah. And it wasn't necessarily that we were bombing. It's just that people were like, well, what the hell is this? Yeah. You know what I mean? They literally couldn't kind of get their... I mean, we didn't know what it was. It was just our sense of humour sort of coming out. And the best thing, one of the best things when we used to do it down at Kitty O'Brien's was there were these 5 dudes that used to turn up at Kitty O'Brien's, and they were hard-ass looking bastards, man. They were, they were tattooed, they were menacing looking dudes, and we used to always be freaked out when we saw them in the audience, and Johnny and I'd be like, oh my God, they're going to kill us, those guys, you know what I mean? They're going to throttle us. And they just kept turning up. And we found out, and we were talking to one of them, and we found out that they specifically came to see Sugar and Spice.
Yeah, really?
And we were like, are you serious? And I'm like, man, we love you guys. Whenever we hear you guys are on, we come and watch it just to see you guys. And it was like, well, there you go. Never judge your audience. You know what I mean? Because you never know who's going to like you and or hate you.
Yeah. You received critical acclaim, 98, Billy T. James Award winner, and then the group disbanded in 2001. It was sort of quite short-lived. Was that just the reality of the amount of work and not money becoming a factor?
Yeah, it very much was. And it, I'd had kids and stuff. And one of the difficult things about comedy early on, particularly when, Johnny and I and Radar and Brennan, you'd go on tour and you'd work your ass off and then end up paying money. You know what I mean? And that was the reality of it. And you were like, what the... why am I working my ass off? And you just didn't make money, and other things started to... I'd got an agent by then, things were starting to happen for me, work-wise with, my acting and voice work and stuff, and I had a young family, and there was never... It wasn't like there was some sort of acrimonious split. It was just we went slightly different directions, you know what I mean? And, we still sort of talk occasionally about the idea that we could, do a bit of Sugar and Spice stuff.
Get that oil back out.
Well, it was funny, actually. We did a gig it was ages ago. We had a bit of a comeback, and, we were live, physical SOBs back then. We were bouncing all over the stage. We're too old for that shit now, you know what I mean?
Is my recollection right that you're quite tight? You're tight-fitting tights and those sorts of situations?
And that was the funny thing too. We'd wear tights and nothing on the top.
That's my recollection.
And we used to always chuck baked beans and powder down, our tights. And then we'd finish the gig and chuck it all in the bag and forget about it. And then we'd go to do the next gig and take the bag along and go, oh, God, we haven't cleaned our, And so we'd have tights filled with baked beans and talcum powder. And it was like, oh, God. Yeah, we were pretty nuts with the old outfits. Johnny especially, actually. He loved dressing up. And I think he got that because he's got 2 sisters. And they used to dress him up as a young fella all the time. And I think that's where he got it from, you know what I mean?
And he's still good. There's that scene in What We Do in the Shadows where he's sort of dancing flamboyantly with the mesh singlet and stuff. So
that's very Sugar and Spice.
How good would it be to get the old band back together, though? Because
God.
You think about like the cult status you've got and Johnny and together one last show, make it happen.
Yeah, maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
Is it around that same time where Sugar and Spice sort of came to an end? Is that West Auckland, Hollywood, Xena, Hercules, Young Hercules kind of time frame? Do they run into one another?
Yeah, pretty much. And I think that Xena and Hercules were the saviour of the New Zealand acting industry, not just for actors, but also crew and stuff like that, because, it was an American sort of production. And it hired a lot of people, and it was Xena and, Hercules that got me through some very difficult times, when I got cast in those shows. And also, too, the money was like, in New Zealand terms, it was like, oh, man, it would be something like $1,000 a day, which was a fortune back then. And often what would happen is, because they were such a big production, you'd be on set, and you'd have maybe a scene at the end of the day, and they'd get you on set, and then they'd come over to you and they'd say, "Oh, sorry, Jase, but it looks like we're not going to get to you today. We're not going to get to your scene," and you'd be like, "Yes," because you'd have another day, a paid day's work. You know what I mean? It wasn't like, "Oh, bugger, no, I was so into it." It was more like, "Yes, I'm going to be paid for another day." You know what I mean? You take everything you can get.
There's this amazing clip someone directed me to. It's like a 4-minute mashup of you on Young Hercules as, and I'm going to butcher this name.
You'll get this. You've been practicing.
Hephaestus?
Hephaestus. Yeah.
God of fire and forge. But it's like a mashup with Ryan Gosling.
Yeah, man.
Like, did you work closely with him? Did you know him well?
Oh, I didn't know him well. I didn't know him at all. And of course, he wasn't the huge star that he is now. And it's funny with Hephaestus because I got the audition for that, and it said he is a forger and a massive god of blah blah blah. And I went, I'm not going to get that. Look at me. I'm a pipsqueak. With my withered legs. And there's no way they're going to cast me as a god, but I got the part. And I was like, just goes to show you never know. And, yeah, I met Ryan doing Young Hercules. He was such a skinny ass back then, too. He was your classic teenager, man.
Could you tell, though? Was he a good-looking man?
Oh, he's a good-looking fella.
Yeah.
But he's beefed up a lot since then.
I mean, you've both gone.
Yeah,
You've both done well.
We've
both done well since then.
Look, he's done okay.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say he's done all right with himself. You know what I mean? But actually, I do remember Ryan, and he was lovely. He was a lovely guy. And I think my character was his favourite character. And it's a great thing to say to my daughters, because they're like, Ryan Gosling, my God, like most women, I suppose.
Or men.
Or men,
Yeah.
Indeed, all men. God, he's gorgeous and blah, blah, blah. I've worked with Ryan Gosling. And they're like, yeah, whatever, Dad. And I'm like, no, seriously, I've worked with Ryan Gosling. And they're like, I don't think so. And then you get those clips out and they go, my God, it's true,
When I
yes, one for Dad.
I'll be honest, when I first saw it, and I didn't know that you'd been in Young Hercules, I thought someone had done a little sort of...
deep fake.
Yeah, deep fake. I was like, okay, it's a little joke that Jase Hoyte used to work with Ryan Gosling.
And that was a good little stint for me because that was like 3 episodes or something I was involved there. And that was a good money earner.
Yeah. Which again, as someone who'd seen you on Sugar and Spice, was such a right angle turn from those characters to be.
Yeah.
But that was you were an actor, right? That was your. Well, I guess was it your goal or to be an actor?
Yes, it was. I mean, I've always considered myself an actor, and a lot of people see me as a comedic actor, but I consider myself an actor. But it just so happens that I'm reasonable at comedy. You know what I mean? And so I've never kind of specifically said, "Oh, I'm a comedic actor," and that's all I am. I consider myself an actor. In fact, my one ambition in my career left sort of thing is to play a very serious dark role. That's not acting, that's not funny at all. That's dark and depressing and stuff. But I've always seen myself as an actor. It's just that my career has gone in the path of comedy,
But and Stephen read the credits. You've got Shortland Street on there as well, which
Yeah.
wasn't a comedic role. I think you were involved in a lot of
I've killed a lot of
situations there.
Yeah, I've killed a lot of core cast on Shortland Street. I think in one star I was a dodgy pharmaceutical dude, and I blew up one of I can't even remember the character's name, and I stabbed another one, and then I was a psychotic teacher or something, and I...
Ferndale,
maybe something like that, and then I bashed one of the nurses with a hammer or something.
Wow.
There must be some Shortland Street diehards out there that are like, why does this guy keep popping up killing people?
Well, there was always they're very careful to sort of space it out, so that, different characters. And my last character, he was quite a significant sort of character, and the story just sort of stopped. And you don't sort of find anything else. And
maybe they've left it open for...
maybe, but because I killed one of the main one of the main cast, and I remember saying to Michael Galvin, who's core cast on that show.
Dr. Chris Warner.
Chris Warner, of course. I remember saying to Michael, my story has just stopped. I mean, isn't there a resolution? And he said, welcome to Shortland Street, mate. That's it. We'll just chop it off there and move on. But, yeah, Shortland Street's terrifying from an acting point of view. They don't bugger around. Basically, if you get your lines out, it's, take, move on.
Is it the opposite to Young Hercules then by the sound of it?
Oh, yeah. In those shows, you got way more time, and... What I learned on Shortland Street, the only way you got another take was to stuff it up. Right. So if I was halfway through a take and I wasn't liking what I was doing, I would deliberately make a mistake. So they'd go, okay, cut, let's start again. Otherwise, they just, I think they make something like 28 minutes of television a day, which in television world is ridiculous. I mean, you just don't hear about it. Your normal production, you'd get maybe 3 or 4 minutes of television a day. And I think Shorty Street's something in the range of 28 or 30 minutes a day. It's just boom, boom, boom. It's a machine.
Does that appeal to you? I feel like the get in there, get it done is sort of aligns with you for some reason.
Yes, it does. I don't like faffing around. You know what I mean?
And I apologise for the tyre situation.
Really. No, that's no issue at all. But I think my sort of philosophy in terms of acting is kind of diminishing returns if you're going for take after take after take after take. What I've often found, particularly with like voiceovers and stuff like that, the first take is the best one. And then they'll go, oh, we'll try this and 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 this. And you go, okay, fair enough, that's their prerogative. But inevitably, they generally go back to the first take. You know what I mean? And I get to the point where, if we're doing take after take, you start to lose your character. You start to you're doing it over and over and over again, and you lose the kind of vibrancy of it, which is why I found Moon TV great, because it was real, fast turnover. And kind of off the cuff stuff. So, I don't like faffing around, that's for sure.
I can understand. Just before we get to Moon TV, 7 periods with Mr. Gormsby.
Yeah.
I've heard you speak about that role, that it was one that you perhaps most enjoyed through your acting career.
Yes.
Is the character just a really fun guy to play?
Yeah, he was. He was an absolute bastard. And I remember Danny Mulheron, who was the director, saying to me, yeah, he's just a complete bastard. And they had no redeeming features whatsoever. So that was really appealing in terms of playing that kind of character. And I used to get hate mail, man. They hated Steve from Guidance so much. But it was once again one of those things where I kind of, especially with the huge pulnamu and all that sort of, it was a piss take in many respects. And I've always been kind of dubious about the whole counselling thing sometimes too, that it's, I don't know how to explain it. It was fun to take the piss in that regard. You know what I mean? In terms of often that sort of thing of, hey, I really care about you and how's things going and talk to me and stuff. And actually, it's just a load of crap. You know what I mean? They don't really care. It's like whatever.
Did you pull that character from any real life experiences coming through your own guidance counselling sessions at Dilworth, maybe?
But we did actually used to have, I think it was Sugar and Spice, where we had some sort of counselling situation, and I had a massive pulnamu, like massive one, and it was very much like, I think the word I'm looking for is patronising.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like, look, that's great that you're, really talking about how you feel and all that sort of crap, and that sort of thing makes me go, nah.
And the last one I wanted to touch on was Power Rangers.
Oh, God.
So I've got 3 young kids.
Yes.
So you pop up on my screen in the most unexpected time, like fucking Jason Hoyte.
Yeah.
And there's about 20 different seasons, and my 5-year-old knows all the character. He probably knows your characters' names for a bunch of them. Is that kind of a rite of passage for Kiwi
I
actors?
can't even remember Power Rangers, to be honest. I remember I was like some sort of circus sort of character at one stage with crazy sort of hair and stuff like that, but I really don't remember Power Rangers.
Yeah.
Not because I was off my face or anything. It was just one of those jobs you move on from. But I also did a lot of voiceovers for Power Rangers, for their characters. The weirdest voiceover I ever had to do was for Power Rangers, and my character was called Donkey Vac, and it was half donkey, half vacuum cleaner.
Wow.
It was the most difficult job I've ever done in my voice work, in my voice career. Trying to be a donkey and a vacuum cleaner at the same time. It was just horrendous.
Can you give us a couple of lines?
I can't even do it. It was just this horrendous. And I just kept getting, feeling like I was going to faint all the time. And, I was hyperventilating. And I think I had about 6 pages of script. It was a nightmare.
We're going to have to go back and find that character.
Donkey
We're going to clip
Check
that
him
out.
out.
Get Bowie on that. He'll know exactly where it is.
Okay, so meeting Leigh Hart. So season 3, I think, of Moon TV. And Leigh had a bit of a success, so he'd had a slightly bigger budget and wanted to get an actor in, from what I understand. Tom Scott, who's the cartoonist, who's a mutual friend.
He was involved very much with Gormsby. He wrote Gormsby.
Oh, he wrote Gormsby.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he suggested that you would be great for
Oh, is that how it happened? Okay.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would make sense. Tom was a big fan, and as I say, he wrote Gormsby along with Dave Armstrong and Danny Mulhern, and yeah, actually that probably makes sense, because a lot of people have asked me, when did you and sort of Leigh meet, and I can never remember. I'm like, I have no idea.
That's what I'm here for.
Thanks, man.
Did you know him from Sports Cafe? Did you watch any of that stuff, or did that kind of fly by the wayside?
A little bit, I think, but not massively, no.
And so the Moon TV stuff, you guys, I mean, it's such great chemistry, the way you guys would interact. It was almost like you could just see very quickly where they were going, and you were riffing. A lot of it was off the cuff. Most of it was off the cuff riffing. But I don't know, just the dynamic between you two. Did you know straight away that you'd struck kind of gold with the way that you interacted with each other?
Well, it's interesting because I think in many ways Leigh and I have a very similar sense of humour again, you know what I mean? And he's a very clever guy. He's great for the punchlines and the one-liners and stuff like that. And, you know, it kind of went back to what I was saying earlier, is that I've always believed the best comedy is when you play it straight. You know, and even the most ridiculous characters on Moon TV, they're kind of straight characters, but they're just ridiculous. And yeah, that chemistry, it's a difficult one, but we're all kind of on the same page without ever talking about specifically being on the same page, if that makes any sense. You know what I mean? I think we both found the same things funny, and he'd already established, I think, Moon TV quite successfully before I came along, and I think I did something for him, and then he asked me to come back and do other stuff. And it just kind of really suited my style of performing, in the sense that we're talking 95% of Moon TV's off the cuff. And, you know, we'd sort of generally set out a scene and then just make it up as we went along, you know what I mean? Which is a great way to do comedy, you know what I mean? It's a great, I mean, there was never scripts. We never had a script, you know, so, and actually it's really, really funny, because I think some Swedish company or something like that bought the rights for Moon TV, or for the Late Night Big Breakfast, I think it was. I think it was Swedish. It was some place overseas, and they said to Leigh, "Could you send over the scripts?" And Leigh was like, "We don't have any scripts. It was all just literally off the cuff, you know."
But that Moon TV time, I might have fudged the timelines, but are you playing, like voicing Dog Squad, for example, and then playing the Speedo Cops guy at the same time, and doing the Shortland Street and being Rit Parker and Nan doctors at the same time, like art imitating life in a sort of a way?
Not consciously. I'm sure that, you know, there was other things going on. You know, I'd have other gigs in between doing Moon stuff, and, you know, as an actor you take whatever you can get, basically. And so there was all sorts of stuff going on, but it's really hard to explain with Moon TV, because I just think instinctively I kind of knew what Leigh wanted, and you know, it's one of those weird things. It kind of suited the way I performed, if that makes sense. And he's very clever at, you know, we'd set the scene, and the guy Brent, who does all of his technical stuff, the camera work, and he's phenomenal, was really good at capturing it all. You know, it was a very efficient sort of business, and they're also very good editors as well, in terms of, you know, chopping it all together.
And they still make such digestible clips. Like if you go on YouTube and look at any of those, 2 minutes 30, a minute 40, it's so easy now, which they must have had incredible foresight back then to know that these little short, sharp interludes would make for great kind of content moving forward.
Oh, I think that's one of Leigh's strengths, is that he's brilliant at getting to the crux of what the funny bit is. You know, he's really good at nailing down and going, this bit's funny and this bit's funny. You see, I could go on for hours myself just talking shit the whole time. I really could. But, Leigh was very good at, concluding things and knowing in his head how it was going to look, I don't really have that ability. I literally just turn the on button on and start talking, and it was him and Brent that they had that real skill of knowing why it's funny and chopping it in such a way that it works, But, I mean, we were making, like, in terms of filming, Late Night Big Breakfast would be 4 or 5 days of filming. That's it.
For the whole series, for the whole season.
Yeah. And he'd, there'd be other snippets sort of here and there that we'd film.
I guess you couldn't get Target for that long, that extended period of time.
That was weird, Target. Yeah, I tell you. People literally walking in off the street going, what's going on? But yeah.
Yeah, I'm keen to dig around Late Night Big Breakfast again because my favourite shows. But what would a pre-episode planning meeting look like? Like, say Jack Tame or Jacinda Ardern is there as a guest. Are you having a little chat about... here's a few ideas that we might get into, or is it literally you just sit down and see what comes out?
Oh no, we would chat about what we wanted to do with Jack. For Jack was great because in a way
he loves you, by the way.
Does he?
When he came on, he was
right.
He was speaking so highly of you.
He was fantastic. Well, we thought it's bloody funny because he's a brilliant broadcaster, right? That we kind of took the attitude that would take him under our wing, and he was this young rookie sort of, and we'd sort him out.
Got to ask hard questions, Jack.
Come on, Jack, you got to pull yourself together, And I remember, Jack doing this great interview. I can't even remember who he was interviewing. It was a great interview, and Leigh and I sort of behind the camera going, "Oh God, oh Jesus, he's butchering it," you know what I mean, and jumping in and stuff, and that was a lot of fun. And this is where I talk about sort of the straight characters coming in that really work, and I think that's why Late Night Big Breakfast worked so well, is because we don't want people coming on being characters that are funny. We just want you to, if you're a car guy, just talk about cars. Yeah. Often people would think, well, I've got these gags and these jokes, and it's like, no, just be you. And the straighter people were, the better it works. You know what I mean? Because then we look more ludicrous. But Jack was great. We did one really awkward one with Simon Bridges. Oh God,
was that about the swingers vote?
Well, yeah, no, I think the one with Simon Bridges was, and the concept behind it was, so Simon Bridges sits on the couch with us, and we're asking him questions, and then we realise we've got the wrong guy. You know what I mean? and so we were asking him all these ridiculous questions, and Simon was just sort of sitting there, looking. I don't know what his mood was, and then we'd go, just hold on a second, Simon, and we'd go off set, and Leigh would be like, "This is all filmed, of course, where did you get your questions from?" I don't know. Josh gave me the questions. You know what I mean? And it's like, well, is this the right guy? You know what I mean? And so we'd be asking questions to the completely wrong person. And those sort of times, there were a few. There were a few. You give the people a heads up, the guests a heads up to a degree. But there were a few pretty hairy moments on that show, where I could feel some of the guests tensing up, and it was like, it's that really fine line.
You've got something good when that's happening too, because that's got to make good TV.
You do, because it's awkward. It's awkward, but you just got to hang in there,
Your other superpower is not not breaking character when you're in these absurd conversations.
Yes.
And it's going further and further. Was that just come naturally to you?
Yeah, and I think that's really fun. Funnily enough, I stumbled upon a Moon clip the other day, and it was, we were talking to some environmental dude, and Leigh said, Jason does all his poos in a plastic container. and then Leigh and I were talking about, how much poos we could get in this plastic container, and the good thing about because you can really push it down and stuff, and how I travel on the bus with them, and it was just this normal sort of conversation, and this guy's just sitting there going, what the is going on here? Just stuff like that. I remember with Jacinda, we started talking about my prostate. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that was Leigh's idea, and Leigh's like, and the Prime Minister's sitting there, and I start talking about my prostate. And then Leigh's like, well, I hardly think this is the place, Jase, to be talking about your prostate. And I'm like, well, you're the one that, brought it up, for God's sake. And we get into another argument about why I'm talking about my prostate. It's ridiculous.
It's if you've not watched it, you have to, because it's all free and available on YouTube, all the episodes.
Well, isn't there like Moonflix or something?
No, there is Moon. I should actually push Moonflix. I should push Moonflix.
Leigh set up there.
But the other one, the one that you did all crack with was Mike, the Mongolian throat singer. The scene, and you guys were all losing it in the background. But the Nadia Lim one, the story, because I've heard that this gets, is it shouted at you a lot when you're on the street?
Oh, yeah, massively, man. Seriously. Cook me some fucking eggs. It's one of those ones, because we spoke to Nadia about it and said, are you okay with this? And she was like, yeah. And it was one of those ones where at the time I didn't sort of put too much thought into it. I just went, because Leigh said, well, you should do that. And I went, oh, okay. And I didn't even really think about it. And looking back now, I kind of cringe. I go, oh, God. You know what I mean? It's one of those sort of, oh, my God. And it's been all over the world, that particular one. And I think there's one where it was some sort of thing where presenters lose it. Yeah. And they showed that. It's like, no, I'm not losing it. It's a comedy show.
The context of it's gone, isn't it, when they just clip it.
And it's horrific. And I mean, I'll be honest with you, I wouldn't do it now. What we did there. And but she was a really good sport, and it's just one of those things, still to this day it happens to me. People go, cook me the fucking eggs! And I'm like, oh, God. But funnily enough, that particular bit of filming was just, I didn't really go, oh, there was no sort of, occasionally, particularly when I was doing Moon and stuff like that, you go, oh, I don't know about doing that. You know what I mean? Just pushing it a bit too far. But weirdly, for that one, I didn't. And I think it was because Nadia was okay with it. I went, okay, well, if you're cool with it, then let's do it.
The one that makes me giggle the most was the Quiche Lorraine.
Yes.
And the reaction to that, which is just, oh, fuck. And I don't know why. And Jax, who was on Master Chef, I think, or whatever, it was Master Cook on the
Jax,
show.
Yeah.
She loses it as well. And I think those are my favourite parts, is where the guest or whoever you have, they actually break, but you're able to keep a straight face. It happened on the couch a couple of times as well.
Yeah.
It's when you're talking about poos and coming on the 90, and whether it was like an artesian well, whether it was a...
Oh, yeah. Well, the great thing, and it makes it even funnier when people lose it too, because we wouldn't lose it, you'd just look at these people like, what are you doing? Yeah. Like, this is a serious interview we're doing here. Let's have a bit of professionalism, please. You know what I mean? Because it takes that absurdity a little bit further when they lose it, One of the best, I thought, like my wife was on it once on Moon TV, and she played... She played like a maternal health nurse, a nurse from Plunkett, and she's an actor as well. And she was great because she played it totally straight. And we were talking about breastfeeding, and as you can imagine, it just got more and more ridiculous.
Was that your wife? I know that clip.
She totally holds the line and doesn't budge. Because I said to her before she went on, I said, whatever happens, just stay straight. Just stay in character. And it was actually us in the end that started to lose it. You know what I mean? But
Is that the one they pulled up all the different photos of the birds on the screen? And
yes. And I'm holding my daughter. I get handed a baby at one point, and I'm holding my daughter in that one, I think, weirdly. Yeah.
That's so good. Okay, link us up to the radio side of things, because... because you and Leigh have obviously got a well-known partnership at this point, but
yes.
Were you doing a few corporate gigs, and one of them was like a segment for New Zealand Radio Bureau called Hard Talk, which kind of preceded Bhuja?
Hard Talk was, I don't know, I can't really remember how Hard Talk came about, but that was something that we just did at the offices at Moon, where Moon was sort of set up at that time, and I just remember Hard Talk as being something which we found very funny, the whole concept of hard talk, just ridiculous sort of stuff, and we'd talk about the issues in a ridiculous sort of fashion. But I don't really recall that being connected to the radio. Where the radio came in was when I started doing the ACC commentaries, which I just loved, and we started doing those commentaries, and Mike Lane worked in radio at that stage, and I think we were maybe a year in or something like that from doing the ACC, and I said to, Mike, get me into radio, man, because I've always wanted to do radio. It's one of my things that I've wanted to do, and he said, oh, yeah, you and Leigh, and I said, well, yeah, that would be great, and he did. So we got our sort of first break, and I think the first Bhuja was a Saturday morning show, and it was meant to be a sports show, but of course we never talked about sport. Yeah. And that was the start, and then I think we sort of progressed on from that to Saturday and Sunday maybe, and then we progressed on from there to doing an hour show every day after Mikey Havoc, great Mikey Havoc, and then eventually ended up doing Drive.
Yeah, it snowballed, didn't it? It gained a real cult following quickly, then it became super popular, and everyone I know was talking about Bhuja. It was huge.
Yeah.
But I'm interested in the planning process there, because I imagine that Bhuja...
You're really exposing me here, fellas.
Yeah. Is that all free form?
Yes. Generally, I mean, you'd write down an idea, or you'd have little ideas that you'd have. But look, I will say on the preparation front, minimal would be the best way to describe it. And I think we both have the ability to just jam, and so that really helped us. And as I say, Leigh's a genius with the sort of punchlines and stuff like that, whereas I could just talk forever. And we'd have little topics that we'd touch, of course. But what I loved about Bhuja, and coincidentally what I enjoy doing about the big show now, is that what the topic might be, the Australian netball coach, for example, but then you'd just naturally segue off into all sorts of different directions, and you'd just go in whatever direction you ended up going in. And I think often the best humour is spontaneous. It's when you genuinely arrive at it's just through spontaneity that you reach a really funny point. And that was the beauty of Bhuja, I think, is that we would go off on tangents, and those tangents aren't pre-planned. Leigh might say something that would trigger something in my head, and I'd go off on this tangent, and that would trigger something in his head, and he'd go off on that tangent. And I think that's what people most enjoyed about Bhuja, was that it wasn't your classic sort of commercial radio.
I feel like you've pulled it in now a little bit with the big show, but
yes.
During those Bhuja days when you are so spontaneous, did you have moments in the studio where you've both just cracked yourselves up so much that you can't actually finish the voice break and there's just dead air?
Yes. Oh, many times. Many times that happened. And, it was funny because radio is quite staunch in the sense that there's certain things you don't do. You don't do that. And in many respects, Bhuja was anti-radio. That was the whole idea of it, was that we were anti-radio. All the rules, don't worry about the rules. And so we'd make mistakes, we'd stuff up, and that would be a part of the show. And there were often times where we'd lose it on air. I've got to tell this story, and it's a terrible story, but it's true. We had I think it was a hauraki, significant milestone in radio hauraki. And this is terrible, and we were celebrating Radio Hauraki, and we thought, it'd be great to get the old pirates on, and get some of the old school boys on, and this is terrible. And anyway, so we went on Facebook and found one of the old guys on Facebook and sort of got in contact with him. Maddie, our producer, got in contact with him and so forth. And so anyway, I went back on air and I said, we're going to get blah, blah, blah on the radio to come and chat about the old days and blah, 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 blah. And that was all fine, and we did that. And then Greg Preble came into the studio, the rock Greg Preble, and said, Jase, you getting blah, blah, blah on the show, are you? And I went, yeah, man, yeah. And he said, unfortunately, he's passed away, mate. He's no longer with us. He's been gone for a little while. And I was like, oh, my God. And I felt so bad. And I'd already gone on air to say he was going to be on air with us, you know what I mean? So I'd already, and so I went, oh, God, I felt terrible. And I thought, I'm going to have to come on and apologise and stuff. And I was saying to Leigh and Maddie, you boys need to help me out here, man. You need to help me out here. And I went on air, and Matt and Leigh just lost it completely while I was trying to explain that the person that we were trying to get on air was actually dead. And Leigh lost it so much. He gets what I call the Scooby laugh going on, you know. Matt was like completely curled over. And I recall actually Leigh did a little bit of wheeze in his pants because he was laughing so much. And I was desperately trying to keep a straight face. And I've got Matt on this side, Leigh on that side, losing it completely. And that was painful, man. And there was just huge pauses while I fought to not laugh at the situation that I found myself in. But yeah, there were heaps of times. I mean, there were heaps of times we lost it. And the same with the Big Show, you know, there's heaps of times where we lose the plot.
Was that the genesis of the "he's dead, isn't he" gag?
I don't know where that came from, actually.
It seems like the listeners, if it was after it, would have been thinking, okay, this is the
well,
he's dead, isn't he?
No. And no, I think that probably came before, you know. And what I always loved about Izzy was because, you know, Leigh would tell this extravagant story, which, you know, and it would be like, and I'd be listening to it and I'd go, oh, so you were talking to blah, blah, blah. And he'd go, yeah. Where were you talking to him? At the Wings Bar at the thing. So you were talking to him at Wings Bar, blah, 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 blah. And then I'd say, you know, well, he's dead, isn't he? And he'd go, is he? And one of my favourite parts of that was then Leigh would say, well, who the bloody hell was I talking to? You know what I mean? It's like, well, who was that I was talking to? If it wasn't him, God.
Yeah. I saw that one with Bill. I was watching that one with Bill English.
Oh,
used
yeah.
That gag. That was classic. Well, there must be times, though, with Bhuja, like when you're expected to come on and be entertaining and funny and it's all freeform, does it become stressful as well?
Oh, yes. I mean, you know, many, many times, particularly because I was sort of anchoring it, you know, you'd be 10 seconds away from going to air, and I would literally have no idea what I was going to talk about, or literally no idea what I was going to say. Many, 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 many times. You know what I mean? And you know, it would be like, and my head would be going with sort of things in my head, and I'd just start talking. I'd literally just start talking, and a lot of the time I wasn't quite sure what I was even talking about. I'd just start talking, you know, welcome back to listening to Bhuja, and blah, 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 and just hope like hell, you know, that Leigh would jump in with something or Maddie would jump in with something. But many, many times, and in terms of, you know, traditional radio for, you know, your bosses and stuff, that's a nightmare. They're like, no, you got to plan out your shows. You got to know exactly what. I mean, some shows are completely scripted. Some shows are so scripted that it's like, you say that, then you say that, then you say that, then you come in with that, like literally every break. And we were never like that. Never.
Which is exactly why it was so popular.
Yeah,
it was
so
different to anything else out there. And I think we kind of knew that it was all off.
Yeah. It was. And that wasn't made up. It was very much off the cuff. But yeah, there were certainly some stressful times. I think it was our first weekend doing Drive, and I was anxious, you know, because it was Drive. It was a big responsibility. And we had some musician come in, was he from Hüsker Dü, I think? And he arrived like an hour early, no shoes, you know, just this sort of bedraggled dude, man. And I think it was our first week of doing the Drive show. And he just sort of, and we said, oh, we're not on for another hour, man. And he was like, okay, I'll just hang here, man, it's cool. And I was like, oh, okay. And so he just hung and just walked around the office looking at stuff. And anyway, we did this interview, and he didn't like you know, I think it was Hüsker Dü, and I was a big Hüsker Dü fan. And he was like, I don't want to talk about Hüsker Dü, you know, because there'd been a falling out and stuff. He wanted to talk about his own stuff, and I started, and I said, you know, to give it some context, you of course were part of Hüsker Dü, a band I really loved. And he was like, yeah, you know, I don't really want to talk about Hüsker Dü. And Leigh was like, yeah, Jase, he doesn't want to talk about Hüsker Dü. And I was like, okay. And then this guy, he's got a solo career, and Leigh just dropped me in it big time, man, and said, yeah. And he was mentioning his solo career, and Leigh was like, you know all about a solo career.
No.
I didn't have a fucking clue about a solo career, right? I mean, I literally had no idea. And I was like, yeah, man, we'll get into that a little bit later. And this dude took it up, and he was like, oh yeah, you know, my solo career. And he said, so tell me some of my songs and stuff.
No.
And Leigh was like, yeah, Jase, tell him some of his songs. And I was like, you son of a bitch. And it got real bad, man. It got real bad quick. And this guy was, we were in the middle of the interview and he went, fuck it. I don't have to put up with this shit. And walked out.
Wow.
And I was like, oh my
Really?
God.
Yeah.
And Leigh was like, oh yeah, he's walked out. That's so good. And I'm like freaking out, you know, massive panic attacks. And, you know, it was like, oh God, it was stressful, but good times.
It seems like there's a real partnership when you're free-forming with someone, because it's very easy to sell a hospital pass. You know, oh, what's coming up on the show, Jase? Oh, we've got a big finish coming up. Leigh, why don't you tell us about what's coming up at the end? Sort of thing.
Oh, yeah, totally. That was it, because we had no idea what was coming up. So he would often do that, you know.
Like you do me every week, Steve, when you say, Shay, you got an outro lined up. And I'm like,
yeah, we always threw each other under the bus. I think that was part of it, you know what I mean? And that was always fun. Because it forces you on the spot to come up with something. You know what I mean? It's like, so what have we got coming up, Jase? Yeah, I tell you what, mate. And you just talk shit until something popped into your head, and then you go, and we'll be getting into that after 5. Beautiful.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good. So back to the ACC stuff. So that worked. That blew up at the same time because the ball, in my opinion, the ball-by-ball commentary was so good and so professional sounding that it literally could have and perhaps should have been on Sky. And then the chat around it was just so absurd, that contrast, right? Is that why you enjoyed it so much?
It was a brilliant concept. And one of my fantasies in my life was to be a cricket commentator. I love cricket. And I used to listen to, you know, on the old wireless there, the cricket, you know, the domestic game and stuff like the Sound of Summer. I loved cricket commentaries. And if I could have my life over, I'd love to be a cricket commentator. But anyway, Jeremy Wells contacted me because he knew I was into my cricket big time and said, would you be interested in being part of the ACC? And I said, bloody oath, yeah, man. And, mate, those first 2 years were some of the best times of my life. I tell you, I absolutely loved doing the ACC. And particularly, too, because we had the caravan at the grounds and you got the atmosphere, and it was just a really magical formula. You do the ball by ball, keep that relatively straight so that cricket lovers knew what was going on, and you did that. And then you had the absurd chat outside of it. And it just took off, man. It really did. And brought so many people into the game of cricket that normally wouldn't listen to cricket. Yeah. Heaps, like my sister-in-law, hates cricket, but listened to the ACC religiously. And that was the idea, was to bring in more fans because, you know, Lane and Wells and Heath and all those guys and Leigh, we're all huge cricket fans. We're genuinely huge cricket fans. And so that was those first 2 or 3 years, just the best, man. Crazy times.
Because you were a top umpire, right? How far up the umpiring chain did you get?
I got reasonably high up.
Are we talking List A?
No. Oh, yeah, I did some List A matches, but never... hadn't quite got to the domestic sort of umpiring, but you know, I was doing Prem cricket and all that sort of stuff, and the odd sort of Auckland B, you know, Hamilton B sort of games. But actually, ironically enough, the sort of ACC took over from me doing the umpiring, and the thing is, you know, a lot of the players recognised me anyway from shit I did in comedy, but when I started doing the ACC, no one took me seriously anymore as an umpire. They were like, whatever, Jase. You know, it's very stressful umpiring, very stressful. I have a lot of admiration for people that do that because it is hard jacket, man. You're standing there for 7-8 hours, full on, and you always get some nutters too in every team. So
another string to your bow. It's like there's so many different parts. It's like what's true and what's not.
Yeah.
But just on the ACC stuff, so like traveling around for 2 years in the caravan, like it looked like it felt like a real party atmosphere.
Yes.
And same, I guess, with Bhuja. It was a little bit rock and roll. It's kind of like you're giving off that vibe. You don't drink. You're not a drinker.
Mm-hmm.
Was it difficult being in those environments with so much sort of drinking and partying around?
Well, it's actually really funny, you know, because we'd be in the caravan there, and there'd be beersies and, you know, all over the place and that sort of stuff. You know, and I'd be dying of thirst, you know, and there was plenty to drink. It was just all alcoholic, you know what I mean? And it was like, fellas, do we have any water here at all? Could we maybe get a bottle of water? But yeah, I mean, that is a tricky one. You know, I've had my battles with that stuff, and battles that I wouldn't wish on anyone, and it's tricky, you know, in that environment. But I was so into the cricket and so into doing the commentary that, you know, I didn't even sort of notice it in the end. But it can be a difficult thing to when you're surrounded by it.
Yeah, as he looks down at export gold beers.
I mean, I'm in the same situation now. I recently, last year, made a decision that no, that's not for me anymore. And then lo and behold, we get an alcohol partner on board, and it's sort of like, oh shit, how do you kind of play it? And I think the support of your mates and the support of people around you help you pull through that. And I think in a weird way, the ACC provided that. It was an opportunity for men to talk about men's issues in a light-hearted way, like you know, testicular bits and pieces and perennial situations. And I
mean, Lane always took it too far, of course, but you know,
well, when
he was shockingly bad. He rested his testicles on my head one time, I remember. But no, exactly. It was fun, man, and and you're right. It was a good way to sort of bring up those sort of issues in a pretty relaxed sort of fashion. You know what I mean? Without them being too earnest.
But do you ever get too old to talk about cock and balls?
I don't think so.
I agree.
I don't think so, man.
Smut talk.
Yeah.
Smut talk.
Yeah.
Where do you stand on that?
Because
you've thrown Lane under the bus here, but is it people in glass houses shouldn't throw stones?
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mike's great in that sense, you know, because you can. I mean, I'm not easily shocked. Let me put it that way. But sometimes he went that extra bar, can I put it that way? And that's why people loved it too, you know, because we often did get into areas. And I think it was one of those dubious sort of things too where you can't get BSA complaints and all that sort of stuff. So it was kind of free form and we could really go hell for leather in that regard. But
what made it great was that you'd come back to the ball by ball when the bowler was at the top of the run up.
Totally,
what's happening at the cricket,
and that's what was really important about it was that you know, we wanted to do that as professionally as we could, so that, as we say, the people that were listening for the cricket as well got an actual idea of what was happening and an accurate idea of what was happening, and because we played that really straight, of course, it contrasts really nicely with the absurdity in the chat.
Jeremy Wells' foot fetish chat that he brought up.
Yeah, exactly, that sort of stuff. And so it was a really good combo.
So Bhuja breaks up after a few years. Leigh goes on to start his sort of chip and beer empire. And
does he ever?
Yeah, he's doing quite well.
He's doing all right.
And I want to talk about the Big Show now because we love the Big Show as well. And the dynamic with you and Mike. There's parts of it which is similar, freeform, I feel like, but there's also, it seems like a little bit more maybe of a structure.
Oh,
is that Keyzie? Does Keyzie bring that sort of structure?
He tries to.
Oh, okay. Well,
Keyzie tries to, the mad bastard. But yeah, I suppose, yes, I think it would be fair to say there's a little bit more structure in the show now. And Mike Minogue's a clever bastard, and he's as sharp as a tack, Mike. And I actually met Mike through the ACC, and we once again got on really, really well. And, you know, I did paranormal and stuff like that. So it felt like a good fit. And he's another one of those guys that can just riff on anything. You know, I remember once we were doing one of the things on radio. It was a voice break coming up. We had nothing, and he went, spinach. And so we just started talking about spinach, you know what I mean? And he's very sharp, Mike. He's great too with the punchlines and twisting things and U-turns and stuff like that. So he's a lot of fun to work with.
Yeah, you guys are so quick together, and again can just read each other where you're going with the bits and pieces.
Yeah,
which is
the thing that gets me, I think. Like I watch it again now. I must have watched it about 100 times. Is the retelling of When You Met Your Wife, fictitious or otherwise, at the track with My Ratracema.
Oh yeah,
and
My Ratracema.
the thing that just makes me laugh so much, and you've done it a couple of times already on this episode, is your choice of language and the way that you and I think you described it as a haggard something next to the billowing lady in the red dress. But do you read a thesaurus? Do they just come naturally? How do you?
No. Yeah, I'm kind of weirdly odd school with language. You know, quite seriously, I used to read a lot of poetry, and I do read a lot. But yeah, I don't know where that stuff sort of comes from. Actually, I had one of my daughter's teachers a little while back, and I've got 4 daughters, as you probably know, and saying how articulate my daughters were. And they, she was saying they obviously come from a very wordy kind of household, and I've never really consciously thought about it. And sometimes the right word will just pop into your head. But yeah, that was a classic one there. My poor wife, man. She doesn't listen to the show. No, she's great. No, seriously, she's really good. She doesn't. She knows me. You know what I mean? She's like, couldn't give a shit. But yeah, I feel like
we spoke at the top of the show about some of the influence, and I feel like I've started to take that on. Where when I retell stories, I'll deliberately throw a word that is either charged or doesn't quite fit into what you're doing, and it almost makes people kind of perk up to what you're saying or the story that you're trying to say. Did he just use that adjective to describe?
Like when you said actor.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah. We won't keep you much longer. I did want to talk about Talkback, though, the show that's recently been on. Is that one that you wrote with Mike Minogue?
Yeah. Mike and I came up with the idea of Talkback, and, I've got to say that I'd never written a show before, as we've been talking about. I'm very much a free form kind of make it up on the spot kind of thing. So that was a really challenging exercise for me. And I remember we sort of planned out what the show was going to be about. We each wrote out our first episode, and Mike sent us to me, and I went, holy shit, that's good. Mine was shithouse. Mine was terrible, man. I was like, oh my God. So he immediately sort of raised the bar, and I think I got better as I went along in terms of my writing. But I have to give credit where credit is due, and the majority of the great writing on that show is Mike Minogue. It has to be said.
Talented man.
Very talented.
Hey, we'll let you go, Jase, because I know you've got the big show coming up.
Yeah.
But Shay, you got an outro lined up for us?
Come on, mate, you can do it.
I'm gonna finish on this because I think it's important for you, particularly Steve, me not being married. But Jason, your one piece of advice for people is to never stop wooing your wife.
Yeah.
Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, that was actually advice given to me by my dad. And he said to me, never stop wooing your wife, son. Been together for 26 years. But always keep it interesting, man. Always keep it alive and don't take it for granted.
Much like this podcast.
Yeah,
because this started as a dream for us.
Yes.
And the opportunity now to sit with one of our top 3 guests that we wanted for the year, the only one on that list that we've ticked off, by the way.
Yes. You want me to talk to Jeremy for you?
Would love it.
No worries.
Would love it. No, ask him why he's not responding to my emails.
He can be a bit, bit of a diva.
Yeah.
Wellsy.
But I found myself through this episode just being a podcast fan and listening to you. So thank you very much for giving up your time.
No worries, man.
This has been awesome.
Yeah. Loved it, Jase, you mad bastard.
Yeah, good on you, you mad bastards. Been a pleasure.
Cheers,
no worries.